Cowboys Nation, stop whatever you're doing right now because what I'm about to tell you could completely reshape this franchise for the next 5 years. This is not a drill. This is not clickbait. This is real. This is happening. And you need to hear every single word of what's coming next. The Dallas Cowboys are standing at a crossroads, and the decisions being made in that front office right now could either launch this team back into championship contention or send us spiraling into a rebuild that none of us want to see. Before we dive into everything, I need you to smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell because if you're a true member of Cowboys Nation, you cannot afford to miss a single update during this absolutely wild offseason. We're pushing toward 15,000 subscribers, and I only want the real fans riding with us. Now let's get into this, because what's happening in Dallas right now is nothing short of chaotic. Let me paint the picture for you. On one side of this equation, you've got an elite wide receiver, a legitimate game-changing weapon who just came off one of the most dominant seasons by any pass catcher in the entire National Football League. We're talking about a guy who hauled in 93 receptions, a guy who racked up over 1,400 receiving yards, a guy who found the end zone 9 different times and struck fear into every defensive coordinator who had to game plan against this Cowboys offense. This is top 3 production in the league. This is the kind of season that forces teams to pay whatever it takes to keep a player around. And what do the Cowboys do? They slap the franchise tag on him. Now on the surface, that sounds like a commitment. That sounds like Jerry Jones and the front office saying, "We see you, we value you, and we're going to make sure you're wearing the star next season." But here's where things get complicated, and honestly, here's where things get a little scary for every fan who bleeds blue and silver. Reports are now surfacing that despite the franchise tag, despite that $28 million commitment, this same receiver could still be on the trade block. Yeah, you heard that correctly. A franchise-tagged player, a guy who just put up elite numbers, a guy who became one of Dak Prescott's most reliable weapons in crucial moments, could potentially be shipped out of Dallas before the season even begins. And I need you to really sit with that for a moment because this isn't some depth piece we're talking about. This isn't a guy who had a couple of good games and got overhyped by the media. This is a legitimate number 1 receiver in his prime years, and the Cowboys might be willing to let him walk right out the door. Now let's talk about why this is even being considered, because nothing happens in the NFL without a reason. The Cowboys are currently projected to have somewhere around $29 million in cap space heading into the new league year. That might sound like a lot of money to the average person, but in the world of professional football, that's actually a major problem. When you've got a franchise quarterback on the roster, when you've got holes to fill on defense, when you've got multiple players expecting new contracts, $29 million disappears faster than you can blink. And here's the reality that nobody in Cowboys Nation wants to face. If the front office decides to lock this receiver up long-term, the projected contract would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $122 million over 4 years. That is massive money. That is the kind of deal that reshapes your entire roster construction for years to come. And apparently, there are people inside that building who are questioning whether that's the right move. But here's where this story takes an even crazier turn. While the Cowboys are weighing their options, another team has emerged as the perfect landing spot. The New York Jets are sitting on a war chest of resources that makes them an absolute threat to steal this receiver away. We're talking about a team with approximately $83 million in cap space. We're talking about a team loaded with draft capital, including 4 picks in the first 2 rounds of the 2026 draft and 3 first-round picks in 2027. The Jets have both the financial flexibility and the ammunition to make a blockbuster trade happen, and sources are indicating they would be very interested in pairing this elite receiver with their existing young star at the position. Now, imagine this for a second, Cowboys Nation. Imagine George Pickens catching passes in green and white instead of blue and silver. Imagine him paired with Garrett Wilson, creating one of the most dangerous wide receiver duos in the entire NFL. The numbers back this up in terrifying fashion. Pickens grades out in the 80th percentile for contested catches, meaning he wins those 50-50 balls at an elite rate. Wilson grades out in the 81st percentile for separation, meaning he's constantly getting open against tight coverage. You put those 2 skill sets together, and you've got a deep ball monster working alongside a route-running savant. That's the kind of combination that keeps defensive coordinators up at night. That's the kind of combination that could instantly transform an offense into a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And right now, the Dallas Cowboys might be the ones who make it happen by giving up their own superstar. I want you to think about what losing this kind of production would actually mean for the Cowboys offense. 1,400 yards doesn't just appear out of thin air. You don't replace that in free agency. You don't replace that with a mid-round draft pick. You don't replace that overnight. When you lose a receiver who can make contested catches in traffic, who can stretch the field and demand safety help over the top, who can come up clutch in pressure moments when the game is on the line, you feel that absence in every single game. Dak Prescott's job becomes harder. The running game sees more stacked boxes. The entire offensive ecosystem shifts, and not in a good way. But here's the counter-argument, and I want to be fair to both sides of this debate. If the Cowboys trade this receiver, they're not doing it for nothing. They would be acquiring multiple high draft picks, creating significant cap flexibility, and potentially positioning themselves to make major improvements on the defensive side of the ball. And after what we witnessed in 2024 with a 7-10 record and another missed playoff appearance, maybe the front office feels like dramatic action is necessary. Maybe they look at this roster and see a team that needs more than just a talented receiver to compete for championships. Maybe they see fundamental flaws that require a philosophical shift in how they build this team. And that brings me to the second major storyline developing in Dallas right now. Because while all this chaos is swirling around the offense, the Cowboys are simultaneously being linked to a high upside defensive move that could either be brilliant or completely disastrous. We're talking about a young cornerback from the San Francisco 49ers, a former second-round pick who was once viewed as a future shutdown corner but has struggled to live up to expectations. This is Renardo Green, and his name keeps popping up in trade discussions with Dallas listed as a potential destination. Let me give you the background on this player because context matters. Green was drafted in the second round of the 2024 draft, which means he entered the league with significant expectations attached to his name. Second-round picks are supposed to contribute immediately. They're supposed to develop into long-term starters. They're supposed to justify the investment that teams make when they use premium draft capital. Green has started 21 games across his first 2 NFL seasons, so he's not some project sitting on the bench. He's gotten real playing time against real competition, but here's the problem. The results have been rough. According to Pro Football Focus, Green ranked 92nd out of 114 qualified cornerbacks last season. That's not developmental struggles. That's genuinely poor performance at the NFL level. Reports indicate that he dealt with mental lapses throughout the season, moments where his technique would break down or his decision-making would fail him at crucial points. There were issues with over-aggressiveness, where he would jump routes too early and give up big plays. There were issues with inconsistency, where one game he'd look like a future star, and the next game he'd look completely lost. And here's the part that really makes you pause. All of these struggles happened while playing in a defense coached by Robert Saleh, a man widely regarded as one of the best defensive minds in football and someone with a proven track record of developing defensive talent. So the natural question becomes, if Renardo Green couldn't succeed in that environment, surrounded by that coaching staff, why would he suddenly figure things out in Dallas? It's a fair question, and honestly, there's no guaranteed answer. But the Cowboys are apparently intrigued by the opportunity, and there are legitimate reasons why this gamble might make sense. First and foremost, acquiring Green would be relatively cheap. When a player struggles like this, his trade value drops significantly. The Cowboys wouldn't have to give up significant draft capital to bring him in. It's a low-risk move from a resource perspective, even if the on-field outcome is uncertain. Second, Green fits the profile of player the Cowboys need. The secondary has been a glaring weakness for this team, and they need bodies at cornerback. They need young players with upside who can develop into long-term starters. Green checks those boxes on paper, even if his recent tape doesn't inspire confidence. But the biggest reason for optimism, and I really want you to pay attention to this, is a name that Cowboys Nation needs to become very familiar with: Christian Parker. If you don't know who Christian Parker is yet, you will by the end of this season. He's built a reputation throughout the league as an elite developer of defensive backs. Look at what he accomplished in Philadelphia before coming to Dallas. Young cornerbacks who came into that system and produced at high levels almost immediately. Players who understood their techniques, who played with discipline, who maximized their physical tools. The idea behind targeting Green is simple but potentially powerful. You take a talented but struggling player, you put him in an environment with a coach who specializes in fixing exactly those kinds of problems, and you hope that the combination unlocks something special. This is the definition of a boom or bust move. The best case scenario is legitimately exciting. Green develops under Parker's tutelage, becomes a solid number 2 corner, or even pushes for number 1 duties, and the Cowboys suddenly have a young starter at a position of need for a fraction of what it would cost in free agency or the draft. You fix a major weakness without breaking the bank, and you do it with a player who still has years of team control remaining. That's the dream outcome, and it's absolutely possible given Green's physical tools and the coaching upgrade he'd be receiving. But the worst-case scenario is equally concerning. The mental lapses continue, the inconsistency persists. Green looks just as lost in Dallas as he did in San Francisco, and the Cowboys have wasted time and resources on another failed reclamation project. The secondary remains weak heading into the season, and fans are left wondering why the front office keeps taking these kinds of gambles instead of investing in proven talent. And honestly, that question has been building for years now, Cowboys Nation. There's a pattern here that we need to acknowledge. Dallas has developed a reputation for targeting these types of players, former high draft picks who need fresh starts, talented athletes who haven't put it together yet, high upside projects that could break out under the right circumstances. Sometimes it works, sometimes you find a gem that other teams gave up on too early, but a lot of times it doesn't work. A lot of times there were legitimate reasons why those players struggled elsewhere, and changing jerseys doesn't magically fix fundamental issues. So when you zoom out and look at everything happening with the Dallas Cowboys right now, the picture becomes both fascinating and concerning. On the offensive side, they might be willing to trade away a proven elite weapon for draft capital and cap flexibility. On the defensive side, they're targeting a struggling young cornerback as a potential reclamation project. The philosophical statement being made here is unmistakable. This front office is willing to take significant risks. They're willing to bet on upside over certainty. They're willing to make moves that could look brilliant in hindsight or completely disastrous, with very little middle ground. And after a 7-10 season, after missing the playoffs again, after watching this roster underperform expectations, maybe that aggressive approach is exactly what's needed. Maybe playing it safe wasn't working. Maybe the only path back to championship contention runs through bold decisions that shake up the status quo. Or maybe, just maybe, this franchise is panicking after a disappointing season and making moves that will haunt them for years to come. The reactions across Cowboys Nation have been predictably divided. Some fans are applauding the willingness to think differently, to move away from the patterns that haven't produced playoff success. They see trading a receiver for draft capital as smart asset management. They see targeting a developmental cornerback as exactly the kind of value play that builds sustainable success. These fans trust the process, trust the coaching staff, and trust that there's a larger vision at work. But other fans are absolutely terrified. They see a team potentially giving up an elite weapon when weapons at that level are almost impossible to find. They see a defense that's been bad for years now rolling the dice on a player who already failed in one of the best systems in the league. They see a front office that talks about Super Bowl aspirations but makes moves that feel more like rebuilding than reloading. And honestly, both perspectives have merit. What happens next is going to define this franchise's trajectory for the foreseeable future. If the Cowboys do trade their star receiver, they need to maximize the return. Multiple first-round picks, premium draft capital that can be used to address the defense, flexibility to extend other key players. Nothing less will be acceptable, because you don't give up that kind of production for anything other than a franchise-altering haul. And if they do bring in Renardo Green, they need him to work. They need Christian Parker to work his magic. They need this coaching staff to fix a player that one of the best organizations in football couldn't figure out. The margin for error is extremely thin. What I need from you, Cowboys Nation, is to let me know exactly how you're feeling about all of this. Drop your take in the comments right now. Would you trade the receiver if the return was right, or would you lock him up long-term no matter the cost? Would you take a chance on Green and trust the coaching, or would you prefer the team spend real money on proven defensive talent? There are no easy answers here, and anyone who tells you otherwise isn't being honest about the situation. This offseason is shaping up to be one of the most pivotal in recent Cowboys history. Every decision matters. Every move carries weight. The difference between competing for championships and fading into mediocrity could come down to how the front office handles these exact situations over the next few months. The pressure is immense. The stakes couldn't be higher, and Cowboys Nation deserves to know exactly what's happening every step of the way. That's why I need you to subscribe to this channel right now if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. We're covering every rumor, every trade discussion, every contract negotiation, and every move that impacts America's team. This is the most important offseason in years, and you need to be informed. The road to 15,000 subscribers continues, and I only want real Cowboys fans on this journey. Make sure you smash that like button if you made it this far. Show me that Cowboys Nation is engaged and ready for whatever comes next. Because one thing is absolutely certain. This franchise is about to make some major decisions, and those decisions will echo for years to come. We're either on the verge of something special, or we're about to watch a front office gamble big and lose even bigger. Only time will tell. But one thing I know for sure, we're going to be here covering every single moment together. This is America's team, and we never back down from the big moments. I'll see you in the next one. Stay locked in, Cowboys Nation.